Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into, well, a really remarkable story from our source material. This isn't some abstract theory, it's a detailed narrative, basically a blueprint, describing this alternative economic and social structure that was actually successful, resilient too. And it was all built from the ground up by just one person who initially went viral teaching life optimization systems.
Yeah, and it's the details, the specifics, that make this source material so fascinating for a deep dive like this. We often look at movements fueled by, pure ideology, but this gives us mechanics. So our mission here is to really unpack those mechanics. How was it funded? How did it scale up? What specific structures did they use? And maybe most importantly, how did it manage to become self-sufficient, even when the external economy eventually collapsed? We really need to zero in on the, well, frankly, surprising financial details and some of the community innovations they came up with.
Right, and the starting point, the initial capital, it's totally grassroots. It kicks off with this guy teaching people, and the quote is what their school should have taught them. Basically life skills, optimization systems.
Yeah.
And he gave it away for free initially. That free model built a huge, massive community, which then led to this pretty unprecedented crowdsourced funding approach.
Exactly, and the level of commitment there, that's where it really shifts from just being a viral hit to, like, a serious infrastructure project. The sources specify 333,000 people. They call them gifters. And each one voluntarily signed up for $50 a month for 3 whole years. I mean, that shows some serious belief in the vision.
Okay, let's just run the numbers on that for a second. That initial commitment, just the first month's revenue was $16.65 million. Now, that's definitely real money, but starting a whole self-sustaining economy, that needs massive, massive scale. So you've got 1/3 of a million people funding this idea. But the next step they took, that sounds like where things got really interesting, maybe even risky.
Well, yes, $16.65 million is significant seed money, absolutely. But it's not going to build you an entire economic safety net on its own. And this is where the founder strategy gets really ambitious, moving beyond just crowdsourcing into, well, high-level financial leveraging.
Hang on, though. If the main goal is stability, self-sufficiency, wouldn't taking huge loans against just 1 month's crowdfunding revenue be incredibly risky? It feels like a massive gamble. Did the source material talk about the downside, the risk involved in scaling up so aggressively?
That's a really important question. And the key was how the loan was structured. It wasn't just any loan. The founder took that initial $16.65 million, the first month's haul, and used it strategically, leveraged it, multiplied it by 5.6 times, actually, by depositing it with certain banks. And that secured just over $92 million in non-recourse loans.
Okay, non-recourse.
Yeah.
For anyone listening who might not know that term, break down why that's so critical here.
Right. Non-recourse is crucial because it isolates the risk. It means the founder personally wasn't on the hook for that $92 million. If the whole plan went sideways, if the external markets crashed early or something, the banks could only seize the specific asset bought with the loan money, in this case, the real estate. It protected the core movement, the education side, the community itself from that specific financial risk, a kind of firewall.
Okay, so it was a calculated risk, not just a wild bet. And that leverage capital, that $92 million, it went straight into buying and building apartment buildings. Lots of them.
Immediately, yes. Yeah. Multifamily apartment buildings. But it wasn't just a financial play. It was directly tied back to the social promise, the deal with the gifters.
Ah, right, the free housing.
Exactly. The social return was built in from the start. Those original gifters, they were guaranteed free housing and continuing free education. But, and this is a big but, only if they kept engaging, improving their lives using the systems, and actively contributing back to the community somehow. So it wasn't a free ride. It demanded personal accountability to access the collective benefits.
And that contribution, it wasn't just like volunteering for community events, right? It moved into actual economic participation pretty quickly. Because the founder didn't just stop at housing, he also bought existing businesses, started new ones, and then did something radical with them.
Yes, he converted all of them into worker-owned cooperatives.
Yeah.
Co-ops. This immediately created jobs for thousands of those original gifters. And crucially, it locked them into this new economy, not just as residents or employees, but as actual owners. That leap, from someone giving $50 a month to someone owning a piece of the company they work for, that's really the engine for the next stage.
Okay, so that transition really sets things up for the massive financial success that apparently followed. The $16.65 million a month was the seed, bought the initial assets, provided the housing. But these co-ops, the businesses owned by the workers, they started generating serious profit. That's what made the whole thing sustainable, maybe even collapse-proof. How fast did that kick in?
Incredibly quickly, according to the sources. The community now had 2 major income streams running. You still had the original $16.65 million coming in each month from the gifters finishing their 3-year pledges. Steady baseline. But on top of that, the co-ops, fueled by that initial capital injection, started generating enormous new revenue. We're talking a net profit after expenses of $369 million per month. It's really a powerful example of what happens when you combine collective ownership with optimized systems.
$369 million a month, net. That is just a staggering amount of money. Usually when you see numbers like that, the wealth concentrates, power corrupts, the original mission gets diluted. But the sources say something truly radical happened with distributing that profit, right?
This is arguably the ethical core of the entire model. The founder put a strict, mandatory cap on his own wealth. He limited his personal take-home pay to just $5 million a year, period. Didn't matter how much the overall system was making.
Wait, only $5 million a year? When the system is netting hundreds of millions a month. From a purely, traditional business perspective, wouldn't that make it impossible to attract, say, top executives or specialists who could earn way more elsewhere? Doesn't that seem like a potential weakness?
It's definitely a limitation if you're thinking in purely conventional terms, but it's also presented as the ultimate defense mechanism. The source material argues this cap guaranteed ideological purity. It prevented the whole thing from becoming about personal enrichment for one person. The system wasn't designed to compete on executive salaries. It was designed to maximize collective well-being and resilience for everyone in it. So that huge amount of remaining profit, hundreds of millions every single month, was legally required to flow straight back to the co-ops themselves, and ultimately to the workers who, remember, were now co-owners.
Right, so the profit was literally engineered to fuel the collective, not individual bank accounts. And to make sure this structure stuck wasn't just based on one person's goodwill, he set up a formal financial institution, a credit union.
Yes, exactly. He chartered a dedicated credit union just for all the co-ops. And the sources explicitly compare this structure to Mondragon, the huge Spanish cooperative network, famous for its integrated worker-owned businesses and financial co-ops. Setting up their own credit union based on that model was absolutely vital. It legally cemented the collective ownership, made sure that people truly owned the assets, not some external entity or just the founder.
Okay, so with all of that profit not getting siphoned off to the top, that massive cash flow must have been reinvested back into the community, improving daily life in tangible ways. Which I think brings us to the next really fascinating innovation you mentioned, tackling storage and consumer waste.
Yes, this addressed something almost universal, a huge inefficiency in modern life, really. Just think about all this stuff people own but barely use, right? Camping gear, maybe a power washer, special tools, holiday decorations. It all just sits there cluttering up basements, garages, attics, or costing money in storage units. It's a huge mental and financial drain.
So what was their solution? The sources mentioned automated warehouses.
Yeah, nearly fully automated storage warehouses. That's the term used. They built these right within the housing areas, both the apartment complexes and the single-family neighborhoods. And these weren't just sheds, they were sophisticated systems. They cataloged everything, ensured everyone stored items. And crucially, they made it super easy for residents to borrow and share items efficiently.
Huh. So it changed how people thought about owning things.
Fundamentally, yes. Why buy, say, a big expensive ladder you'll use twice a year, or some niche kitchen gadget if you can instantly access a shared one, insured and nearby, whenever you need it? The sources claim this dramatically shifted consumption patterns, and the economic benefit was apparently massive for residents. People saved, quote, hundreds and thousands of dollars per year. Just because they stopped buying things destined for long-term storage after only brief use, they got back money and living space.
That level of optimization, financial, social, logistical, it all seems geared towards resilience. Which brings us to what sounds like the ultimate safeguard. The parallel financial system they built. They weren't just operating within the normal fiat economy, they built their own internal protected track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That protection layer was a proprietary blockchain system. It ran completely in parallel with the external, dollar-based economy. But this blockchain, it wasn't just about creating some internal token or crypto. It was much more integrated. It served as a technological guardrail for the whole structure, ethically and economically.
Ooh, I need to understand this better. How could a blockchain actually prevent inflation, aka greed, as the source material puts it?
Yeah.
That sounds, hard to enforce technologically.
It worked through a combination of radical transparency and, essentially, algorithmic rule enforcement. First, the blockchain made all internal capital flows completely transparent. Every co-owner could theoretically see where the money was going within the system. No hidden accounts, no off-book steals. Second, it was programmed to enforce the rules. The fixed compensation ratios, like that $5 million cap for the founder, the mandatory profit-sharing percentages going back to the co-ops, those weren't just policies. They were coded into the system. It was designed to be incapable of processing transactions that violated those core ethical and economic rules. It blocked internal mechanisms for greed.
Wow. So it wasn't just tracking, it was actively enforcing the agreed-upon financial morality.
Okay.
And this preparation, this internal system, it really proved its worth later on, right? The sources mentioned an external collapse. The mainstream economy did eventually fail, attributed to the greed of the uber-rich and the apathy of the masses.
Yes, and according to the narrative, when that external collapse hit, hyperinflation, bank failures, the usual chaos, the internal community, they basically just carried on, quote, like nothing happened. Their resilience was baked in. The proprietary blockchain mesh network just took over, handling all their internal transactions, resource planning, governance, completely insulated from the failing fiat world outside.
And that must have been a powerful advertisement. As people were fleeing collapsing cities, seeing the stable, functioning alternative, the source says they eagerly joined, opted into the We the People blockchain.
That's the description. They saw the quality of life, the guaranteed essentials like housing and food, the resilience, and they wanted in, which speaks volumes about the model's appeal when faced with a real crisis. And that blockchain, again, it was more than just currency. It enabled self-governance, transparent digital voting, consensus mechanisms, and it functioned as an ERP system, enterprise resource planning. for managing all their collective resources efficiently. It was the whole operating system.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. What are the absolute core elements that made this self-sustaining model work, according to the sources? You start with leveraging community capital strategically.
Right. Then you impose mandatory strict wealth caps at the top.
You implement universal worker ownership through the co-op model.
You optimize resource use through mass sharing, like those warehouses.
And then maybe the linchpin, you use technology, the blockchain, to enforce transparency and prevent the system from basically eating itself through greed. Is that the loop?
That seems to be the essential engineered loop described, yes.
Right.
And what's compelling is that this model seems to offer tangible solutions, not just for the initial problem of, say, information overload that the founder systems addressed, but for really fundamental issues: housing insecurity, economic instability, consumer waste. It suggests that building a better system isn't just about good intentions. It might require actively designing technological guardrails against predictable human failings.
It's a really potent narrative. A movement built on self-improvement translates into a functional, profitable, and seemingly collapse-proof economic reality. And success wasn't just about making money, but about the mandatory, transparent distribution and reinvestment of that money.
Precisely. And the source material concludes with the idea of the world slowly starting to adopt this system, which suggests that maybe real societal change needs more than just new economic theories. Maybe it requires these fully transparent, technologically enforced structures that force profits back to the actual creators of value, the co-owners, and severely limit wealth hoarding at the top.
Which leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. Could an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning tool, if designed not for maximizing corporate profit, but for total transparency, collective governance, and optimizing shared resources, could that actually be the key to a radically different, more resilient way for societies to function globally? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.